Joining me now for more on this regional story is the president of the Europe-Georgia Institute, George Melashvili. Thank you so much for joining me on A News.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation.
So let's actually begin with what we know about the claims by the US.
Well, the Office of Foreign Assets Control announced its designation on the 7th of August. It is a part of a broader action against crypto exchanges and networks that, according to the United States, Tehran is using to launder money, evade sanctions, and eventually support IRGC. The element in Georgia is not that much connected to Georgia, first and foremost. The person behind it, Siavash Kayanpur, he's an Iranian-born who holds Dominican and Afghan citizenships and resides in the United Arab Emirates. He utilized the very liberal frameworks that Georgia has for business registration that has been a comparative advantage of Georgia for a very long time. And he registered a company within the country, this LTD Shellbit, while at the same time he also controls some companies in Poland and also in United Arab Emirates. According to the United States Office of Foreign Assets Control, eventually we're talking about at least $3 million US. However, also what has not been that much paid attention to is the fact that he was also in control of several online casinos. And these casinos were very likely used to also launder money for the IRGC. Also, what is interesting about this topic is that the designation did not come under money laundering charges. It came under Executive Order 13224, which is counter-terrorism activity. So in that case, it was material support to the IRGC and Nobitex. So it's not a technical money laundering citation, but a whole terrorism financing designation. Also, unfortunately for Georgia, it's not the first time that Georgian companies come under scrutiny. In May, so last 2 months ago, 3 companies registered in Georgia, Arvix, Rapira, and Ifori. They have also been designated, but not for their connections to Iran, but because of their connections to Russian Federation.
Mm-hmm. So then how significant is crypto becoming as a tool for sanctions evasion?
Well, crypto has always been a tool of sanction evasion, but right now it's not that much about crypto itself, because any tool or any cash can also be used for evasion. It's more about the activities of the Georgia's National Bank and also of the Georgian authorities. So far, the defense that they had was that these companies did not register under the frameworks created by the National Bank of Georgia. However, despite the fact that these companies have not registered, they have been able to implement activities in Georgia that were against the national interests of Georgia. So they have been slandering country's reputation when it comes to international business activities. So that's why, even though Georgia is largely compliant when it comes to the FATF compliances and also in general to the regulations and the sanctions that have been introduced both by the United States and also European Union, the question, how did the National Bank of Georgia, together with the Georgian government, allow such companies to operate for such a long time still remains. And eventually what we have seen were not the actions of the Georgian government, but the actions of the United States that eventually sanctioned these companies. So that's a very big question to the Georgian government. How did this happen?
Indeed. So then what does this case tell us about the vulnerabilities of Georgia's crypto sector to international sanctions and illicit finance?
Well, we definitely see that there is some reputational contagion. Georgia's comparative advantage has always been liberal business environment. Georgia is a small country. We do not have rich natural resources, so that's the only way how Georgia can remain competitive. However, every designation, and for example this one, it definitely increases the costs of de-risking for legitimate Georgian businesses and also for corresponding banking relationships. So that's why it is definitely a problem for the government with pretty important foreign policy consequences. Sanction evasion exposes a totally new situation for Georgia in general, because Georgian government has been trying to become to implement these sanctions in accordance with the regulations and the requirements. However, again, we've seen that there is this asymmetry between the actions and the words, and also we definitely see that some companies have been able to utilize Georgia's liberal business environment against the interests of the country.
Yeah, so Reuters reported that Shellbit was connected to a much wider multi-billion-dollar sanctions evasions network. How extensive could this network be? I know you mentioned it earlier, but how could it also face scrutiny?
Well, some crypto outlets have headlined a 4 billion figure. Now, this figure is not directly connected to the Shellbit company. It is connected to the general activities of the IRGC and also the general attempts of the US Treasury to eliminate sanction evasion. So in total, we're talking about huge amounts of money. Again, 4 billion has been named, that have definite connections to Iranian companies and also to the IRGC.
You mentioned that it was the US that actually clamped down on this company. So with Washington now increasingly targeting crypto exchanges linked to Iran, can sanctions actually stop these financial flows? Or will it be the money will simply move through different platforms and different jurisdictions, maybe not in Georgia, outside of Georgia possibly?
Well, that's a $1 billion question, because I think we're in a race right now. The United States are trying to find all those loopholes that have been used by different actors, not only IRGC, but also the others, while those actors are also trying to find more and new loopholes to be able to ensure that sanctions are evaded. So again, we're in a race. The State Department, together with the Treasury, have been working pretty well so far, and they have been able to dry out flaws to many terrorist organizations around the world. Let's hope that they will be able to continue, because that's absolutely important to not only US, but also to the global security.
All right, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate your insights on A News.
Thank you for the invitation.